And what I want to start with is, I think you'll probably find this amusing when it first shows up. What we're going to start with is this. And this young person was 13 when this picture was taken. And I told you about this last week. But in case you forgot, the story here is this person took a picture of himself every day for 15 years. So he was 13 here. He was 28 when he took his last picture. I don't know how long ago that was. Not that long ago, but he might be in his 30s now. But the point here that I'm trying to make with this relates to evolution. And it relates to the idea that we have our own time scale. We, human beings, have a time scale that is determined primarily by our biology, which means that there are things that we just simply can't perceive. And one of the things that we can't perceive is small changes that occur over small amounts of time. Somehow, we manage to just sort of work with the fact that if you have a yard, or you live across the street from a park, or you come to school, you look at the lawns, right? You see the grass on the lawns. And if you show up tomorrow and the lawns haven't been mowed at all, you're not going to notice any difference in how long they are. They're not longer. They don't change. The next day, they're not going to really be different from the way they were the day before. Every single day, there's no change in the lawns. They always look the same. Yet, after a week, they need to be mowed again. And those of you who have the good fortune to have hair are in the same position. Every morning you wake up and you never look at your hair and you're like, wow, it is so much longer this morning than it was yesterday, because it's not. That happens day after day after day. No change, no change, no change, no change. And then after a month you're like, you better get a haircut. And we see those same kinds of changes all around us in a million different ways. We don't see them day to day. Some of the changes we don't even see week to week or month to month. If I were to take Liv right now and swap her out with Liv from a month ago, none of us would be able to tell the difference from her physical appearance. We just wouldn't know. She's going to look about the same. If I were to do that with Liv from 6 months ago, some of you might, if you knew her really well, you might notice, but most of us probably wouldn't. A year ago, maybe. 2 years ago, almost certainly. 4 years ago, if suddenly, how old are you? 14? 15. 11-year-old Liv with right here, you all would be like, what? So that is interesting, and it is pertinent to the work that we're doing, because in order for us to really imagine how a species can evolve from a currently existing species, we have to think about it with that mindset. We have to think about it with the mindset that you start with one population of organisms and natural selection is occurring, and you can't tell the difference. You don't see any difference. You don't see any difference. If you look at that species in the year 1 million before Common Era, and then you look at it in the year 999,999 before Common Era, same. Different organisms, because the individuals are dying and being born. I know this is a population. And that population is changing because individuals are dying and being born. But as time goes by, you don't see any difference. But somehow, 500,000 years later, you have something that is not the same species as the original. So that's where this comes in. This is a visualization of exactly that. So we can see, I'll go back and we can look at some of these individually, but you can see, there's no difference, right? In between any two pictures, there's virtually no difference. But look, he was 13 when he started taking these pictures, and you can see him getting bigger. This has probably only been 6 months, maybe a year. And that's not the same kid that we were seeing. And it's not just the hair, although you see the hair, you can see his hair, it looks like it's almost alive, right? This wiggling, growing thing. But day to day, you wouldn't see. Just day after day. And think about that first picture. It's pretty different. And then you'll see as he, transitions out of his mid-teens and into his late teens, you'll see, right about now, right? He looks really different. His face, the shape of his face has changed, like his stature has changed. He does not look the same anymore. Same, we probably, if we put this picture together with that first picture, we would see the similarity. But every single one of us at this point would be like, oh yeah, he's older now. But again, like this picture to this picture, I can't tell. He looks the same day after day after day. There's little things like, you know, he's getting some stubble. So if you show me a picture with not much stubble and you show me another picture with a little bit of stubble, I might guess, oh, well, that second picture was taken later, but you don't know. Look at him, like that's astounding, right? And we don't have to look at all of this. I think the point, yeah, well, okay, we can. There's one other thing that I want to point out that has nothing to do with evolution or speciation, but some of you probably noticed this. When he was young, he was smiling. Then there were a bunch of pictures where he wasn't, and now he is again. And I don't know how meaningful that is, but I bet that's adolescence, right? Like you all can probably relate to the idea that some days you just don't have that much to smile about. So maybe, just maybe, this will help you remember if you have those days, it does get better, right? Like he was a happy kid, maybe he wasn't such a happy adolescent, and now he's a happy young adult, even though he's losing his hair. The same thing happened to me when I was in my mid-20s. It was thinning, and then I finally, like when I was 27, I started shaving it because it was just, there was no hope. Right? Okay, I'm gonna stop it now just because this is the end, right? Like that's pretty much the end. So let's go back to the beginning real quick. And right, I mean that is dramatic.
Wait, go in like the middle.
But yeah, and so right, you look in the middle and you can sort of see, like we can see these places where, okay, he looks younger there, he looks older there, younger there, older there. But if you start picking like randomly, like I can't tell where he's older if I just click on a few of these at random that are down here. Like I can't tell which one came first and which one came second. They all look the same. And even these very young ones, right? Like that picture versus that picture versus that picture. Like I can't tell which one is older. And these later ones too. Like this one versus this one versus this one. We can't tell which one is older. And you can kind of jump, right? Like this one and this one, they look about the same. That's 6 months or a year. Like that one and that one, I can't see the difference. I just don't. Like beard and hair and stuff, but in terms of overall age, no. But you jump a little bit further, I can sort of tell there. There he's got a little bit of an older look. There he definitely looks younger, right? And here, he looks like a kid. So the point here is the only way you can really appreciate how we think speciation can happen through natural selection is that you have to be able to understand that something cannot perceptibly change over time but still end up very different from how it started. And that is, it seems like a paradox, but it's not. If we were to really carefully measure, we would see differences between all these pictures. Maybe he grows by 1,000th of a millimeter, or maybe there's like like one of the ways that we tell age is by looking at like lines on people's faces, not wrinkles, but just like lines, And so, like, if we looked at those lines, we'd see a little bit more depth to them. Like, there's ways we can measure it. He has to be changing every single day to go from where he started to here. But we're never going to see the change day to day. So when we think about the evolution of a species, we have to think about it in those terms. We can't say, well, like, we'll see a difference, because we won't. We will not see a difference. And part of what I'm going to ask you all to be looking at over the next 3 days is evolution of a real species, how it evolved, under what conditions it evolved, how we suspect that changes might have accrued in that species over time. So here's what we're going to do. I'm gonna break this down into 3 parts. The first part is I'm just going to give you a big overview of what we're doing for the next week. The second part is I'm gonna give you something specific to work on today. And then the third part is there's some more things that we're going to talk about, some more things that I want you to learn that we'll be looking at on Wednesday and Friday morning. So Wednesday morning we'll talk about some stuff, and then you'll have a bunch of time to work. Friday morning we'll talk about some stuff, and then you'll have a bunch of time to work. The big picture is I want you to take everything you've learned and everything that you're gonna learn over this week about evolution and put it all together. What I'm suggesting is that you make a Google Slides presentation. I'm gonna have one that you can use as a template. I'll show it to you tomorrow. You can download it and like make changes if you want, if that's easier for you. You can also make your own, completely from scratch, or if you want, you can do this some other way. I just want you to do this work and do the thinking and do the learning. I don't really care if it ends up as a Google Slides or a real paper poster or like separate pieces. I don't care how it goes together. If you want my suggestion, it's Google Slide using my template. And we're gonna break the work into 3 parts, one for each day of class this week. The first part, which is what we're gonna work on today, is just picking an organism and doing some initial research. And this is like critical, because if you pick something that you're either not interested in or there's not a bunch of information about, then you're gonna be out of luck. Like you're gonna find yourself either bored or sort of stymied. You're not gonna be able to do the work. So the first big task today is gonna be pick something that you find interesting and that there is a ton of information about. My example is a bird called the rock ptarmigan. So you can't do that one because that's the one that I'm gonna do already. I have part of it done and I'll have the rest of it done by tomorrow. Or by Wednesday. So what I want you to do is pick something that you just find absolutely fascinating. And if you can't think of something, I'll brainstorm with you, or you're also welcome to brainstorm with each other, but this is individual. I want each of you to come up with your own organism to study. And then the rest of the work that you're gonna do today, once you figured out the organism, I want you to know both the scientific and the common name, and then I want you to think about adaptations. And the adaptations, again, like don't go for obvious, go for interesting. So like owls, for example, have several really cool adaptations. They're virtually noiseless when they fly, and that has to do with like the physical structure of their feathers. They have those great big eyes that can see in incredibly low light, and they have their necks allow their head to swivel nearly 360 degrees. Like those are great adaptations, really cool and really interesting. So pick things like that just kind of blow your mind so that you can think about them and learn about them. And then you're going to use OneZoom and or other web resources to answer a couple of other questions. One is, when did the species, first of all, when did we first see evidence of the species? And you got to keep in mind that, like, what does the species look like over time? It looks like that video we just saw, which means it's a little bit arbitrary, right? Like, at what point was that person an adult? I mean, we all know he wasn't at the beginning. We all know he was at the end. But there's no way that we would all agree on the precise frame that he became an adult. It's not clear. And it's the same with species. When organisms evolve, we know that it's one species at a later time, and it was one species at an earlier time. But we don't know exactly when we would have said, aha, boom, it's a new species now. So we have to like kind of accept that there's some mushiness to this stuff. And then using OneZoom again, you will think about your skill of being able to determine relationships between different species and different kinds of organisms. So what are some other organisms that are really closely related? And if you pick an organism and you can't find any good adaptations, or there's not information about when the species first evolved, or you don't even know, like it's not even on OneZoom, or on OneZoom you can't figure out anything that it's related to, then pick something else. There's no shortage of organisms out there to look at. You can look at plants, you can look at animals, you can look at fungi, you can look at anything that you'd like. Microbes, we're not gonna know a lot of these things. So you're probably gonna be better off with something that where there's some sort of fossil evidence of the organisms. So that means probably plants and animals for most of you, maybe fungi, but not necessarily. And then on Wednesday, you're gonna dive into an adaptation. And I have some more information that I'm gonna present to you about this, but what we're really gonna do is we're gonna look for evolutionary pathways. We're not interested in just saying, here's this cool thing. We're interested in, here's this cool thing, and here's how we think it happened. And for the most part, you're gonna be finding things where people know. Like there's information out there about most of the organisms that you're gonna be looking at. But it may be that you need to do some hypothesizing about how these things arose, and that's okay. And then on Thursday, again, I have some stuff that I'm gonna share with you, but the big push on Thursday is gonna be to figure out, okay, how did the species as a whole evolve, right? What was the ancestor? How is it different? How do we suppose natural selection led to the evolution of this new species? What kinds of things probably occurred? Where did they occur? When did they occur? And how did they lead to changes in the morphology and behavior and biology of the organism that you're looking at? For today, we're just going to focus on that first part, and I have it in a Canvas discussion, so it's linked from today's module, but it's the same thing that I just showed you. You identify the organism by scientific and common name. You identify some of the unique adaptations and what they do. You determine when scientists roughly think it first evolved, and you think about some other species that are closely related to that one. And we have about, what do we have? 35, 20. We have about 25 minutes, and what I expect is that you're going to spend your time thinking, discussing, like actively learning and trying to figure stuff out. In the first period class, I didn't push them on this because we had a fire drill, or I guess it was seventh period, but we had a fire drill. So we only had like 10 minutes to work, but you all, I don't want you sitting in silence. I also don't want you talking about your math test. I want you to, or whatever that is, I want you to be talking to each other about the organisms that you're looking at. I want you to be scientists, learning about stuff, sharing with each other what you're learning, but you're working individually. So that means your conversations are going to be like, oh my gosh, what? This thing is so cool. I didn't even realize this, but the spores are toxic. So this thing, like this plant produces these spores and they fall to the ground and they'll kill seedlings of other plants. Or, oh my gosh, this is so cool. This organism can unhinge its jaws and like swallow things that are much bigger or whatever. Like share that stuff with each other, because that's what makes all of this fun. All right, does anybody have any questions before we get started? Yes? Yeah, go right ahead. Anybody else have questions? Okay, brainstorm, discuss, find something to enjoy about this. That's like, figure it out. Figure out a way to enjoy this, and let's have fun and learn a bunch.
About Friday.
Yeah.